Hey, what's up guys? So in this video I want to break down the stats for each of the pistols we have available at launch in Black Ops 4 and compare the statistics to each other as well as to other more common guns that are available in Black Ops 4. Now I first want to say that this is my first commentary, so I'm probably going to be kind of bad, so just bear with me. So if you watch Xclusive Ace, this is basically the same type of video, just a bit more condensed as I'll be covering multiple guns. And I'll also do the comparisons to other guns that aren't pistols to see how these guns stack up, and to see whether or not they need. Just as a note before I continue the rest of this video, I call the RK7 the RK9 throughout this whole video, so just bear with me on that as well. So there are three pistols in Black Ops 4, the Strife, which is semi-automatic, the RK9, which is a burst pistol, and the Mozu, which is another semi-auto. For all these, I'll cover the shots that kill and damage first. The Strife has a damage profile of 46, 37, 27, which means it kills in 4 to 6 shots. The Mozu has a damage profile of 62, 46, 32, 29, which means it kills in 3 to 6 shots. And the RK9 has a damage profile of 32, 28, 24, and 18, which means it kills in 5 to 9 shots. As for how headshots affect these, they're practically useless for the Mozu and the RK9, assuming you're not running high cal on the Mozu. However, with the Strife, in that 4-shot kill range, if you land all 3 shots to the head, it'll give you a 3-shot kill. And in the 5-shot kill range, you only need 1 shot to the head to give you a 4-shot. As for the Mozu with high caliber, 1 headshot at any range will reduce your shots to kill by 1. And this is pretty strong, and it makes it a good attachment for the gun. Now against armor, the Strife and RK9 take 1 extra shot to kill at their first and second damage ranges. So this means out to 38 meters for the Strife and out to 15 meters for the RK9. Whereas the Mozu takes 1 extra shot for its first 3 damage ranges, which means that goes out to 31 meters. For everything else after that, it's 2 extra shots to kill, but that's kind of irrelevant, seeing as the guns, you shouldn't be using the guns at that range. Knowing the shots to kill is useless without the range though. So on the screen, I'm going to put up the range values for each of the pistols, and I'm also going to include the range values when you add a suppressor or a long barrel, depending on what pistol. The first thing I'm going to put on the screen are images of what various distances look like. And just to clarify before going any further, almost all gunfights in this game will fall under the 40 meter mark, and on most maps, the farthest line of sight you'll probably use these pistols on is even less than that. So as you can see, the Strife and Mozu both have solid range. Although due to the recoil on the Mozu and the longer secondary range value on the Strife definitely has the best range out of all the pistols. And as you can also see, the RK9 has really bad range, and that's by far its biggest weakness. Realistically, once you get past that 6-shot to kill range, which is at about 15 meters, its time to kill plummets, and it'll be outgunned by pretty much every other gun in the game, bar shotguns. 2 other things to note before we continue are that the suppressor does not have much of a negative effect in the Strife and the RK9, and this makes it a solid choice for both those guns. Also, a long barrel has a solid effect on the Mozu, but due to that gun's visual recoil, it's not really effective at longer ranges, unless you're using the 4x scope. As for the Strife, long barrel can be useful for the 4-shot kill range, but aside from that, for the 5-shot kill, it's not really worth it. The next thing to look at is the recoil. First up is the Strife, and as you can see, it has very solid recoil, very manageable. And it's also the same thing with the RK9, it has very low recoil, and you're not going to be using this at longer range anyway, so the ranges you're going to be using it at, the recoil is just fine for that range. As for the Mozu, it has more than the other two, and it also has a lot more visual recoil, as I mentioned before. And that means the gun's iron sights aren't good for like mid-range and past that. If you're going to be using it for longer range, you kind of want the scope on it. Next up are the rates of fire, and I'm putting them up on the screen. Something to note is that the Strife and Mozu most likely always fire slower than their programmed fire rate caps, as this happened in 2 of the previous recent COD games, which were Black Ops 3 and World. And this could make the gun slightly underpowered compared to what the developers intended, assuming they were balancing the guns around their programmed rate of fire. And as for the time to kills, I'm going to put them up on the screen as well. To put things in perspective, I'm also going to put the time to kills of some of the other common guns in the game. And as you can see, both the Strife and RK9 are both pretty underwhelming in the time to kill department. And this is pretty much both of their biggest weaknesses, along with the RK9's lack of range. These guns are pretty outclassed when it comes to their time to kill, although their low recoil and really good handling does help to make up for it. As for the Mozu, it does have a solid time to kill, but with the recoil it may be kind of hard to track shots unless you're at close range, like I mentioned previously. I'll also put the potential time to kills, assuming you get headshots or run high caliber or run rapid fire. Depending on I'd say rapid fire is probably the most useful attachment on the RK9, as it makes its time to kill a decent bit better, as it gives around a 5% increase. Although it varies depending on how many bullets it takes to kill, due to the rapid fire only speeding up the burst. Now, another important stat are the gun's aim down sights and sprint out times. For those that don't know, the sprint out time is the time it takes for a gun to start shooting directly after sprinting, whereas the aim down sights time is the time it takes to fully aim the gun down sight. If the sprint out time is slower than the ADS time, and if you ADS directly after sprinting, the time it will take to fully aim will be the same as your sprint out time. Now, the stats for every pistol are a 150 millisecond ADS time and a 200 millisecond sprint out time. And to put things in perspective again, I'll also put the sprint out ADS times for some of the other common guns in the game. And the ADS time for the pistols can be cut down to 100 mil, and this applies to the Strife along with. This means that with the Strife and Mozu, especially when you have quick draw on, you'll benefit more from not getting caught sprinting, so that you don't get caught ADSing the same as your sprint out time, unless you're running gung ho, which reduces your sprint out time. And as you can see, compared to pretty much all the other guns in Black Ops 4, these aim down sights and sprint out times are top tier, especially for the ADS time with quick draw. And that's one of the biggest strengths. Something that's important to secondaries I haven't covered yet are the gun's raise times. Basically, that's a part of the time it takes for you to switch from one gun to one of these. There's also something called a drop time, which is the amount of time it takes to switch away from your current gun before the raise time from the gun you're switching to. Look at the raise times for these guns. So for both the RK9 and Strife, they have a raise time of 500 milliseconds, while the Mozu has a raise time of 450 milliseconds. And what that means is these pistols will always be better to pull out instead of waiting to fully reload your primary gun, unless you're running Fast Mags 2 on some of the guns, as that reloads almost instantaneously. And to put things in perspective also, the Spitfire has a raise time of 850 milliseconds, so as you can see, these pistols are faster than the primary, as most other guns have a raise time similar to this. Now, some of the last stats we're going to cover are the mobility stats and the reload speeds for each of these pistols. They all have the same movement speed at 100%, which is the fastest in the game, but seeing as the slowest guns in the game, or the slowest primaries, the LMGs have a movement speed at 95%, which is the same as the ARs. The 100% movement speed really isn't that impressive. As for the ADS strafe speed, it's tied with the faster SMGs at 80% the walking speed, which is double that of most of the ARs, which are at 40%. This means that the pistols essentially have stock built in, and it'll definitely help to strafe into your shots you're aiming. Now, as for hipfire, the Mozu and RK9 both have worse hipfire than the Strife, as I'm going to show on the screen. Compared to the better hipfire spread SMGs like the Spitfire or GKS, the Mozu and RK9 are actually worse than those, but the Strife is slightly better than. As for the reload times, I put them on the screen, and as you can see, the Strife has a slightly better reload time than the other pistols, although they all have a very solid reload time, as most SMGs and ARs tend to be in the like 1.3 to 2 second reload. There is one caveat here, and that's with the Mozu. As I was talking about its reload time with the speed reload, without the speed reload, it's extremely long, like around 5 seconds or something like that, to get all 6 bullets into the clip. So honestly, that's terrible. And if there's one attachment you want to run on the Mozu, it's the speed reload. Without it, after you use just one clip, most often the gun will become a liability, as you're going to take way too long just to reload, because you'll pretty much just spend one clip on one person. Now, one of the last things I'm going to look at are the attachments each of these guns get. For the Strife, as I already mentioned, it gets quick draw, silencer, long barrel, along with extended mags, FMJ1 and FMJ2, and a laser sight. Out of all these, the most useful, I'd say, in order from most to least useful, are extended mags, as it only gets a 12 round magazine by default, which at best will kill 2 people with before reloading. Then the silencer, as there isn't much of a range penalty for using it, and it can be used for a stealth. Then FMJ, just in case the enemy happens to be running armor, because the time to kill with the Strife against armor is actually the highest in the game compared to any other gun going up against armor. And then a long barrel and quick draw can be useful, but they're not as useful as the other ones that I just talked about. As for FMJ2 and laser sight, FMJ2 is practically useless on the gun as it further increases the wall penetration and damages score streaks, but both these stats of the gun are really bad. So you're just going to be making it like at best like average in those departments, and it's not worth investing an attachment slot for them. As for laser sight, it's good, but it's only good in very specific situations where you'd be hip firing, and due to the fact that the Strife has such a fast ADS time, you shouldn't be hip firing. The Strife also got an operator mod, which is essentially the same as the tactical knife from previous Call of Duty games. Unless you're going knife only, it's not really worth it, even though it did get buffed recently, because the range still isn't very. As for the RK9, it gets rapid fire, laser sight 1 and 2, extended mags 1 and 2, and grip and suppressor. The only worthwhile attachments out of all these are, in order from best to least useful, rapid fire, suppressor, and extended mags. Rapid fire makes a gun have a somewhat passable time to kill at close range, and I already mentioned how suppressor doesn't really give it much of a range penalty, and you could also use it as a in a suppressed niche. And as for extended mags, it gets a 15 round mag by default, which can generally work for about 2 people at close range, but that's still not that many. The rest of the attachments really aren't worth it, at least in my opinion. I guess you could run laser sight 1 and 2. Laser sight 2 just makes it so you have no movement penalty while you're hip firing. But like I said with the Strife, it's really not worth it because the ADS time is so. For the Mozu, it gets speed reload, high caliber, stock, quick draw, long barrel 1 and 2, and the stabilizer, along with its operator mod. The most important one out of all these is a speed reloader, as I mentioned previously. Then I'd say high cal is also the next best. The other ones they can be useful, but they aren't really worth it. If you do have room in your class though, the Skull Splitter operator mod is actually really strong, and it's worthwhile to use on the gun, as it makes the gun a one-shot headshot at any range, and that's really powerful. So that means you can essentially just spam for the head, and if you get just 1 headshot out of 6, you got yourself a kill. The gun also gets a 4x scope, as I mentioned previously, which does help at mid to longer ranges, but at close range, I'd say might put you at a bit of a disadvantage compared to the iron. As for what I think of these guns, they do have their different niches that they're somewhat useful in, but the best one by far is the Mozu with its operator mod, as this can very easily be just used as a primary gun. The Mozu by itself can also be very good as a secondary gun, where you just use it for 1 kill at close range, with its solid time to kill and great handling. As for the Strife, I'd say it's a little bit underwhelming, but it can be used with a suppressor as sort of a utility weapon, and it can be used at mid-range better than any of the other pistols. I do think the Strife does need a bit of a buff. Basically a buff to its fire rate might suffice, just to make its time to kill a bit more. Now I know the gun's secondary and it's not supposed to be too strong, but most of the time you won't be picking a secondary pistol over the many better options you have available to you in the game, like attachments, a launcher, all the perks you need to somewhat counter all the specialists, and even operator mods on primary guns, which some of them are pretty strong. And as for the RK9, I'd say it's only usable at very close range, and even the Mozu outclasses it at that range, unless you either want a silenced pistol or you want to finish off multiple enemies, as the RK9 would be slightly better for that role. I'd say the RK9 needs to buff the most out of any of the pistols. They probably should increase its range, or maybe its rate. These are just my opinions. You guys might have your own experiences and opinions for each gun. So if, you can leave a comment about what you think of each secondary pistol if you had more success. Personally, I really like good pistols in COD games, so that's part of the reason I want to see them buffed also. So that's it for the video. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it. I'm planning on making videos somewhat similar to this one in the future, along with posting gameplays and giving tips on how to improve. I'm also in the making of a video on how to remap your controls with a normal PS4 or Xbox One controller to play at the same level as someone using a scuff, so stay tuned.